What's up, guys? It is Ben with Ben's Election Predictions, and today I think we have one of my most exciting videos. We are going to give some full coverage on the Virginia governor race. I'm going to show you the polls, I'm going to show you the data, I'm going to show you the historical numbers, and I'm going to show you with the Kalshi markets how I think you can make money. I took your feedback from the last video. We're going to keep this shorter, we're going to keep it more entertaining, so let's jump right into this race. Okay, so what I first wanted to start out with was just a couple of clips from each of the candidates, kind of showing what they're about and kind of like where I think this race stands. So first up, this is going to be a clip from the debate when Winsome Sears, the Republican candidate, is attacking the Democratic candidate Abigail Spanberger for her silence on the J. Jones texting scandal, who is running for Attorney General.
The race because J. Jones advocated the murder, Abigail, the murder of a man, a former speaker, as well as his children who were 2 and 5 years old. You have little girls. What would it take him pulling the trigger? Is that what would do it? And then you would say he needs to get out of the race? Abigail, you have nothing to say? Abigail, what if he said it about your 3 children? Is that when you would say he should get out of the race, Abigail? You're running to be governor.
So this was a pretty tense moment. I think this was actually one of the few moments in the campaign where Sears was actually able to land a punch on Abigail Spanberger. But just for context, and I'll give more later on. But Abigail Spanberger is a pretty run-of-the-mill, moderate Democrat congresswoman, so there hasn't been a lot of drama with her, which is why I'm kind of showing two clips that are, one's maybe pro and then one's a little anti-Sears. So here's one campaign ad that Abigail Spanberger has been running a lot that I actually think is fairly effective. Here goes.
And I sponsored this ad.
MAGA Republican Winsome Earl Sears. Sears speaks for Trump.
I'm supporting what the president is doing.
She backs Trump's billionaire tax breaks.
The bill, as you know now, there's so many great things.
And Sears wants to ban abortion in Virginia, too.
We know abortion is wicked.
Heard enough? Winsome Earl Sears. So far right, she's wrong for...
Yeah, so I just wanted to give you, or show you those clips to kind of give you a sense of where the race stands today. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, just to kind of give a quick overview on Abigail Spanberger, she actually comes from a pretty purple district. She is a congresswoman that's ran for Congress first in the 2018 midterms and, won that race in a kind of blue wave midterm year. She has, performed better than the average candidate would perform. She's won in a Trump won district. So she was kind of seen as the ideal candidate for the Democrats for the Virginia gubernatorial race in 2025. Winsome Sears, at the time, she was kind of seen as the ideal candidate. She, on Glenn Youngkin, the current governor's coattails, won the lieutenant governorship in 2021. One thing that I did want to highlight, though, is she did slightly underperform Glenn Youngkin. Not that much. Honestly, there wasn't a lot of daylight between the candidates, and I don't think Winsome Sears wins without Glenn Youngkin. Okay, but the first thing that I really wanted to cover in this race is why I think it's going to be a blowout. And while this, might not be one of the most controversial opinions, when you're trying to handicap political races, when you're trying to predict races, saying who's going to win, that might not be that hard to do when it's like a 90-10 race, but getting the margin right is, I think, where you can tell the difference between the people that are really good at predicting elections versus the people who are a little bit more novices. So the first point that I want to make is a lot of people are like, okay, Virginia's been trending to the right, since 2020. This is a state that Biden won by 10 points in 2020, but Kamala Harris only won the state by 5 points in 2024, and they have a current Republican governor who won the state by around 2 points. And we see that here. Glenn Youngkin won over 50% of the vote in a fairly high turnout election for a off-cycle race. The one caveat here that I do want to give, though, is that 2021 was a completely different lifetime. 4 years in politics is like 100 years in real life. 2021, we were focusing on completely different issues, and I actually just had a slide that I wanted to share just to kind of show how dramatically things have changed. So this was right after the Afghanistan withdrawal. This happened in August of 2021. The governor election was in November of 2021. This is when Biden's popularity, he had above average positive approval ratings up until around the summer of 2021. And in the fall of 2021 is when and it's kind of vulgar, so I don't want to say it, but it was where you had the F Joe Biden chants, or I'll just say the Let's Go Brandon chants, and people were getting tired of COVID. I mean, you still had to wear masks on the plane. The schools were starting to open back up, but people had kind of thought that they had closed for way too long. You have these videos going around of toddlers like people in this photo having to wear masks when it probably wasn't necessary. It was probably done for political reasons, and parents were mad. This was also when the issue of critical race theory had hit its peak. I think in 2020 and 2021 we had hit peak woke, and then Glenn Youngkin comes in. Trump is no longer president. It's not as toxic to be a Republican in the eyes of maybe your moderate, more left leaning Northern Virginia residents in the suburbs, your wine moms, and that's when Glenn Youngkin truly came in here and took the world by storm and won. But I do want to highlight that I think that this is very much a blip, and you can see that Biden's approval ratings positive. Right when this election happened, all the conditions were just perfect for Youngkin to win. And then what I wanted to move on to next is, just like it was the perfect conditions for the Republican to win in 2021, everything had to go right. Trump had to lose the election. Biden had to be unpopular. I think that's happening in reverse now. And one, I think, common comparison that we can make is that this is going to be a repeat of 2017. And it's actually a better comparison than I think people might say, because like I was saying before, 4 years can be a political lifetime. 8 years would be double that. But we have the same person that is president, and they have about the same approval ratings. Like if we look at the approval ratings of Trump today, we're at about -7. And if we look at the approval ratings of Trump in, I don't know if I have it pulled up right now, but they were very similar when in 2017, where he kind of went from like a positive approval rating back into the more negative territory. This was right after Charlottesville too, and we don't maybe have like a scandal on that epic of proportions now. But my general point is that while we might think that Virginia has shifted to the right, based on it being a 5 or 6 point margin in 2024 compared to a 10-point margin in 2020. If we look at the history of how Virginia has gone, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the state by 5 points. And then you see that Ralph Northam wins the race by around 9 or 10 points in 2017. So I very much see what we're going to see in 2025 be almost a repeat of what happened in 2027. Trump loses Virginia by around 5 or 6 points in 2016 and 2024, and then the Democrat wins by nearly double digits. And the last point that I wanted to make before I move to the Kalshi markets is just looking at the polling average from 2017. It was pretty off. It underestimated the Democrat pretty handily. It was supposed to be a pretty close race. You had some polls showing it being fairly close, and the average was 3.3, and Ralph Northam outperformed this number by around 6 points. And like why I think this is helpful context is because if you look at the polls today, we see that Spanberger is up by around 6 points, but I also anticipate there to be a polling error if we're just going to be looking at the Real Clear Politics average. There are a lot of kind of right-leaning pollsters that I think are kind of dragging the average, more in Sears' direction, but they still even can't even get to the point where they even have Sears within the margin of victory. And I've said this in past videos, but I truly do think that the Trafalgar group, and I've done a lot of research, diving into the crosstabs and like really trying to understand their methodology. I do not think that they are a credible pollster. They don't even have Sears even really that close. I mean, maybe barely within the margin of error with this 3 points. But if we do strip out some of these right-wing pollsters like Coefficient, Trafalgar, Signal is also a right-wing pollster. What is the actual story? So if we look at the New York Times pollsters here, the ones in bold are kind of like their high-quality select pollsters. We see that we go from an average of maybe it's around that like 6 points that like Real Clear Politics has. Bam. You look at all the polls in the past months are all double digits, and you have Spanberger consistently over that 50% mark, which is like where she needs to be, and even in that 55 percent mark. So let's just move on to the Kalshi markets now. I just did my last video on the New York City mayor's race. It's pretty similar in terms of the pricing right now. I actually feel more confident to bond this race, and I think my average price in here is around 89.90 cents. I think on election night I'm like almost sure this is going to be a 96, 97, 98 race. Sears just simply has no pathway. Is there going to be split ticket voting with the other races, with the Attorney General's race? Yes, and so I think that the Virginia race will be exciting for other reasons, but the top line ticket I do not see being competitive whatsoever. And I'll get into the margin of victory in a bit. In fact, I'll just move there now. I think buying the strikes of 10 to 12%, 12 to 14%, and 14 above percent is the right play here. And like if you add up those strikes, you get to around 50%, but I think that is incredibly good value. If you only look at the high quality polls, they have an average of between 10 and 14%. I think the reason why it's priced the way it is, where you have some of these lower strikes being maybe a little bit more expensive than I would anticipate is because of these like right wing pollsters that are flooding the zone, and you're seeing them pop up more frequently, which are kind of buoying up the average for Republicans. I mean, out of these pollsters, 4 out of the last 3 pollsters are right wing pollsters that all have Spanberg within 3 or within 5 points. Oops. So I think a plus EV alpha sharing play right here is to buy 10 and over. So yes, you have to buy 3 brackets, but if I had to guess right now, frankly, I think it's probably going to be around a 13-point margin to victory. But like pollsters, I do have a margin of error. Because Spanberg is winning by so much, I do think it's harder to be precise with these brackets. I think 14 and up also could be a good play too, because you would win this if she wins by 17, or you would win if she simply wins by 14. I I do think that this one is also pretty interesting market, because if you look at what it references here, it references the Real Clear polling average. And the question is, will Abigail Spanberg outperform the polls? We've already covered here that the Real Clear polling average, I think, is a little bit more bolstered by these right wing polls. See, and obviously the New York Times is going to include all of the polls, but if you look at the select pollsters that meet the certain criteria for reliability, it screens out, what I frankly think are the fake pollsters, like the Trafalgar group. You get to an average. Well, maybe people thought it was a little bit more competitive before. Spanberg has run a very, very good campaign, and she's getting above 50%. And this is the key metric. Hillary Clinton was always leading Donald Trump in 2016, but she was never getting above the 50% mark. Spanberg is getting to that and even exceeding that. And so I think the Spanberg plus 12 to plus 14 is probably right. So yeah, this is right now priced at 68%, and one caveat that I will say, even though I think it's pretty likely that she does outperform with the current Real Core Politics average of 6.3, that average is going to move around a lot. So while I think there is value here, just know that this is going to change. And if you really wanted to do research and get a good sense of what the fair value of this market is, I would look at the historical cadence of polls, how often polling outlets poll, which ones are included in their Real Clear Politics average. And then if you want to be safe, I would just wait until a lot closer to election day when it's more clear what that polling average will be. And then there are some other markets here. This Loudoun County market, I think it's pretty low volume to be honest. I think grabbing the higher brackets here is probably right. I am currently sitting out of this market. I do not think that I necessarily have alpha here. You would really want to dive into the historical results. The polling data is not going to help you as much here, just because it doesn't get on that granular of a level. But I also think with some other factors like the government shutdown and Loudoun County being so close to Washington D.C., if this is more blame on the Republicans, you could even see higher Democratic turnout, which helps Abigail Spanberger. Also, just one other market, I think you could similarly bond this market to the 20 or to the Virginia governor's market. All right, guys, thank you for watching this video. Please provide any feedback that you have in the comments, share with your friends. The last thing that I just wanted to leave you with is from 4 years ago. almost to today. This was a bit in the past, but I wanted to kind of show you like how close I was on my 2021 um, prediction, because I think that might give me a bit more credibility on my prediction of right now Spanberg winning between around like 12 and 14, or 12 and 15 points. The most likely one is Youngkin over 25. Where I think that the race is going to be won is within the. I think it's going to be between McAuliffe winning by 1% or Youngkin by 2%. I know that all the trends and all the indicators are implying that. I mean, it's yeah. So and please, I would recommend going and watching this previous video, but like where I end up saying is that I give this range of McAuliffe winning by 1 percentage point and Youngkin winning by two, but ultimately predicting Youngkin at a 75% chance to win, when his true odds, I think when I did this, were around 60%. So I try to be as unbiased as possible. You can see that my range was just exactly right. But yeah, please let me know your feedback on kind of like where you think that the 2025 Virginia governor's race is going to land, and stay tuned. Thanks, guys.